Yeah, I don't think Mother knew about this.
Uncle Marvin was strangled by his own beard.
Yep, you never saw it coming.
And welcome, America, to America's family history show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Two great guests lined up for you today. One is Kristine Bartley. We've had her on the show before. She was working in Des Moines at a cemetery trying to get tombstones for babies who had been buried there, over 4 dozen of them. And has that project changed into something else? You're not going to believe what's going on at that cemetery back in Des Moines. We'll talk to Kristine in about 10 minutes. And then later in the show, Krista Cowan is here from our sponsors over at Ancestry.com, talking about the new beta test that separates your paternal and maternal DNA matches. How does it work? Where is this thing going? What are the benefits? And maybe why haven't you seen it yet? Krista will have all the answers for you coming up in just a little bit. Hey, make sure you sign up for our weekly Genie newsletter this week. We give you a blog from me each week, stories that you'll appreciate as a genealogist, and links to past and present shows. And it's all free. You can sign up on our Facebook page or at extremegenes.com. Right now, it's time to head out to Boston, Massachusetts. David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org, is standing by. Hello, David.
Hey, Fisher, we're getting pretty close to Halloween.
Yes, we are.
We get some great stories for the scary part, but we get some things that are even more scarier at the beginning.
Yes, we do.
But first, I want to ask you, are you registered to go to RootsTech?
I haven't signed up yet, but I know they just opened it up, didn't they?
They did. I'm giving 3 lectures, so I hope to see your smiling face in the audience. So let's go across the pond and talk about something dealing with Russians. And this time it's genealogy, but it's Russians looking for their Jewish heritage so they can become passport-holding Israelis. This is a fascinating story where, Russia was not very open with some of their Jewish heritage under Stalin, for instance. But now the descendants of these people are now looking for their deep roots in Jewish heritage so they can get out of Russia to avoid the draft.
Yeah, Putin's draft has driven this thing, and people are desperately looking for their records right now to get that Jewish ancestry and head off to Israel. And good luck to them. Isn't it amazing? We've got this despot in our times that's creating this demand to know the Jewish ancestry to get out of trouble, whereas 80 years ago we had people trying to hide their Jewish ancestry.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 generations difference, basically.
Yep.
It's amazing. Well, everybody's home is their castle. I'm sure as you think of your own at home and mine. But in Santa Fe Castle, located in Santa Fe, Texas, Ian Dennis and his wife Kristine have smiled. They've spent over $800,000 for a piece of property that may need a little bit of fixing up. Think of the old movie with Tom Hanks, The Money Pit. But this actually looks like an English castle. I sent you a link to it, Fish. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, does it look like something you would bump into in, like, the Midlands of England?
Oh, absolutely. And it was built in the 1930s. And, these people obviously have some money, because I don't know who would want to own it otherwise.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be the talk of the town once it's all restored and they get into it. Right now, it looks like something out of a Halloween movie. You never know what you can find when you're doing your genetics, and, learning about genes is pretty rewarding. But in this case, I'm talking about the jeans that you wear. And a pair of old Levi's from the 1880s, Fish, were recently found down in an abandoned mine. And ready for this? They were worth $87,000.
Wow. They must have been in great shape, I'm thinking, right?
Well, pretty worn down, but that ripped and acid wash jean look is in with the hipsters. So it's entirely possible that, some person saw them and said, great, I don't have to wash them in the washing machine. They're already done for me 140 odd years ago.
Imagine this, $87,000 for a pair of jeans. I mean, there are expensive jeans out there, but I don't think there's anything that approaches this.
You know, with Halloween right around the corner, I mean, obviously the association with witchcraft comes arm in arm, but many of us, including I know yourself, have ancestors that were wrongfully accused of witchcraft. And even before Salem, which I'm lecturing about recently, there was witchcraft trials in Connecticut 4 decades before.
Yeah, actually, I didn't have an ancestor falsely accused. I had one who actually did the accusing. And she accused Goodwife Knapp in Fairfield, Connecticut in 1653, and ultimately Goodwife Knapp was hanged.
Well, here's your chance to do some goodwill. They were looking for 1,500 signatures on a project called Connecticut Witch Trial Exoneration Project. And this is something you can find just by doing a Google search. The state of Connecticut is leading this, and so historians, genealogists, and others are looking for this Connecticut Witch Memorial Collaboration. So do a little Google and being one of the 1,500 signers. I'll tell you, Halloween, with everything going on, have you carved a pumpkin?
I haven't even begun yet, but I've always loved carving pumpkins. I think that's one of the best things of the whole season.
Well, my daughter likes painting pumpkins, but I showed her something, and this is a little scary. This is the early tradition back in Ireland. They didn't carve pumpkins. They actually carved turnips.
Yes.
And just open the image I just sent you and take a look at that turnip.
Yeah, I did. And the moment I opened it and looked at it, it made me jump back. I mean, it's a horrifying looking thing. I guess you can do more with it than you can often do with a pumpkin.
I guess so, but I'll tell you, it doesn't have the friendly, jack-o'-lantern, smiley face. It looks like something you would use to ward off evil spirits or something even scarier.
Yes, exactly.
So for our spooky tale, go out, kids, try carving a turnip and seeing what that looks like in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Well, that's all I have from Beantown this week, folks. And if you're not a member of American Ancestors, we'd love you to become a member. And if you choose to do so, use the code EXTREME and save $20 on AmericanAncestors.org.
Got your back. Thank you so much, David. Talk to you at the back end of the show as we get on with Ask Us Anything. And coming up next, we're going to talk to a lady who has been working in a cemetery in Des Moines, doing amazing things. You're going to want to hear these stories coming up when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Have you hit a brick wall in your family tree? Are you unsure how to use your DNA test results to resolve a research question? Do you want to travel where your ancestors walked and need to find details before you go? Need help joining a lineage society? Whatever your genealogy research question, the answer is Legacy Tree Genealogist. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been helping clients all over the globe discover their story since 2004. Legacy Tree has carefully selected and trained professionals who specialize in hundreds of countries and languages, as well as probate research and DNA analysis. And when you need experts on the ground in the countries where your ancestors came from, Legacy Tree Genealogists calls upon its global network of on-site researchers who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. That's legacytree.com.
Genies, our friends at BYU TV have a new series out created just for us, family historians. It's called How I Got Here. It's a fast-paced travel show where young adults accompany their immigrant parents back to where they came from, their countries of origin. These are 10-day trips of a lifetime where these parent-child duos relive the sacrifice, struggle, and circumstances that led their families to leave to where they are now. There's a new episode every week with visited countries including Italy, Serbia, Mexico, Chile, Israel, Slovakia, and Ghana. BYU TV is on Roku and Fire Stick, online at byutv.org, or through the BYU TV app. How I Got Here is available now with a new episode every week. Feel the impact this journey has on those who grew up not knowing. And just a warning, keep a box of Kleenex nearby. You're going to need it. Hey Genies, as we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Welcome back to Extreme Genes, America's family history show, and extremegenes.com. And I'm so excited to have Kristine Bartley back on the show. She's in Des Moines, Iowa, and for years she's been working with Woodland Cemetery out there, and she's been identifying the stories of many of the people buried there, including many babies who had unmarked graves. And Kristine, it's great to have you back on the show. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here again.
Remind us, what got you started on all this?
Well, my DAR chapter was trying to raise money to put headstones on 536 unmarked baby graves.
Yeah.
In the course of doing that, they didn't want to have an endless fundraising situation. So we had an end date. I couldn't let it go. I ran into the lieutenant governor. She pulled up to deliver Meals on Wheels. I was pulling weeds in my yard. Oh, God. Jeez. And I thought, you know what? I don't care how I look. And I approached her and I said, I understand Governor Branstad has a history fund. And I told her about the baby graves. And she said, here's my card, contact my office, and we'll go from there. Long story short, the governor asked if I would be interested in doing a matching fund thing. And I'm like, who haven't I asked for money? About 5 days later, his assistant called me back to say that he had raised all the money. So I know, bless his heart. So I got really involved in the cemetery after that. I had a lot of family in the cemetery. My grandmother used to take me there when she was placing wreaths on Memorial Day, and it was just like, oh, not another trip to the cemetery.
Yeah,
anyway.
But look at this. You wound up finding actually a baby that one family had been looking for a century.
Right. Over 100 years, baby Frank, they sent me pictures of him. He was darling. I would have been looking for him for 100 years, too. Holy smokes. But that happened a lot. Cholera and typhoid were taking people out at that time while they were traveling west, and so people just buried them and kept going.
Sure.
There are very few babies that are still with family still in Des Moines.
Yeah.
It was mostly unknown. So with that project, I also teach a film class to a bunch of 8th graders. And, you know, the teacher who was from Florida said, oh, where's interesting history about Des Moines? And I said, Woodland Cemetery. Anyway, I connected her with a historian and the 4 times great-grandson of one of Des Moines' early pioneers. The family is still in Des Moines. Suddenly I'm thinking, what about everybody else in here?
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought, a documentary. But I've worked with documentaries, and they have very limited life. So I wanted a different format for these stories.
Well, and you have really done this. First of all, how many people are buried in Woodland Cemetery in Des Moines?
About 86,000. The cemetery was opened 2 years after Iowa became a state in 1848.
Okay.
So there's War of 1812, Mexican-American War, Civil War, all the wars, and just regular people. So I started writing a grant. A friend of mine was a grant writer, so I sent it to her when I was done for her to take a look at it. And she sent me back probably a 6-foot-long email of all the changes that I needed to do. And I thought, there's no way I'm doing this. But it was lockdown, COVID, and I thought, what the heck?
Right.
What else am I going to do?
Of course.
So I made all the changes, sent it off, and got the money. And so I started filming descendants of people in the cemetery.
Nice.
Historians that I knew about people in the cemetery, a Civil War historian.
So they were basically telling the stories of the people in the graves.
Yeah, individuals who are buried in the cemetery. And it became, as I was doing it, it was basically world history and Des Moines' relationship to that world history.
Nice.
I couldn't believe it. And I'm a sixth generation in Des Moines person. And I thought, I never heard any of this stuff. But as you start digging into individual stories, suddenly history becomes more gossipy and actually a little more interesting.
Well, absolutely. And you've got actually QR codes working on some of these graves so people can access these videos. How long are the videos generally?
The longest one is 3 minutes and 46 seconds, and some of them are as short as 20 seconds. There's 124 of them right now, and I'm now searching for another grant to write because so many other people have reached out to me. And the interesting thing about this project, one of the collateral benefits, is in the early days of the Garden Cemetery movement, which happened in rural Cambridge, Massachusetts, with St. Albans, because people were buried in church burial grounds. That was sort of the tradition, but they were becoming 5 and 6 caskets deep, so it was a problem. Anyway, St. Albans opened, and it was very fashionable to sort of walk around in the cemetery and bring a picnic and all that kind of thing. Well, what's happened with these QR codes is that has begun to happen again in Woodland Cemetery. One of the ladies that reached out to me, her name is Ricky King. She's Roots to Branches. She's a genealogist, but she specializes in Black genealogy. And so we did 15 stories of freedom seekers and conductors on the Underground Railroad.
Wow.
In Woodland. And then she had an intern, and the intern filled out all the paperwork for the National Park Service. So now Woodland is part of the National Park Service Underground Railroad network. So the installation has been in Woodland for about 17 months now, and there's been almost 40,000 views from within the cemetery.
No kidding. That is incredible. You've just got to be gasping over what your little project has turned into.
Totally. I'm very surprised by the whole thing, actually. When you get sucked into something, I am down the rabbit hole with Woodland Cemetery, and I realized the other day that the cemetery is going to be 175 years old next year. So on September 16th next year in Des Moines, Iowa, in Woodland Cemetery, we will be recreating the early garden cemetery movement, fashionable walk the cemetery. There are a whole group of women that I know who love to get dressed up in period outfits from the late 1800s, who have volunteered to come and walk around in the cemetery. We have historians that are going to be at different spots around the cemetery to talk about the people that are buried, like in the GAR section and the Civil War section. And I'm, like I said, I went down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, this is exciting, though. I mean, what a great thing to consume your life with is sharing the stories of other people. And you say there are over 80,000 people buried there, so you have an endless supply of stories to pursue, don't you?
I do. I drive into the cemetery and people are like, what about me? What about me?
I bet you. Do you feel that sometimes? You feel like when you go to sleep at night, they're shaking you up, say, hey, wait a minute, I got to talk to you?
Well, actually, when I was speaking in Washington this past weekend, I'm not a public speaker. Every time I think it'll be a great success if I don't throw up on the podium. Anyway, I felt like this presence around me of comfort, and it was amazing when I got up and started speaking. It was just sort of like flowed. They knew I was talking about him, I guess. I don't know.
That's incredible. Tell me one or two of the stories that really stick to your mind.
Okay. There's a story about Henry Tolliver. He started his life as a slave. He was sold away from his family when he was 9. He managed to escape, and he fought for the Union Army, and he mustered out. On his mustering out card, it says he was a slave. Had a nice life going on in Des Moines. He got married. He and his wife, they had 16 children. Anyway,
wow.
his wife was this very kind lady. Anyway, this, I guess in today's term, homeless person knocked at the door. He was hungry. She let him in, and she's feeding him, and they got to talking. Turns out this man knew Henry Tolliver's family. So Henry Tolliver was finally reunited with his brother and his father 50 years later.
Wow. What a story. So in the early 1900s.
Yep. He'd been separated from his father when he was 9, when he was sold as a child. I think that the Underground Railroad stories really stand out in my mind. There's a woman who was born in Vermont, went to Oberlin College, was teaching in Kentucky, and started helping slaves escape. She was the first woman jailed in Kentucky for helping slaves. She ended up moving to Des Moines and is buried in Woodland Cemetery. She's part of the Underground Railroad stories in Woodland. You know, there's a woman who arrived in Des Moines in a covered wagon and became very involved in women's suffrage. Before women had the vote, Des Moines allowed women to vote in local elections having to do with taxes. And there was a vote about the courthouse, and they didn't let women vote. And she took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And they finally had to re-vote because, yes, in fact, she was right. The women could vote in that election. She died in 1911 before the women got the right to vote.
Yeah.
So I interviewed one of her descendants, and the descendant was able to have a plaque placed at the steps of the Iowa Capitol, because that's where she parked herself for years to lobby for women getting the right to vote.
Isn't this great stuff you're doing? Wow, how satisfying. You must wake up every day going, I can't wait to see what's going to happen now.
I do have days like that.
Yes. She's Kristine Bartley. She's in Des Moines, Iowa, working with a rather large cemetery there, Woodland Cemetery. She's marked the graves of babies, found the stories of historical figures, marked the graves with QR codes, created videos. What a project. They're going to put up a plaque to you there one day, Kristine.
I don't know. You know, it's like when you retire and there's nothing to do, it's like you got to look out.
I haven't had that problem yet. But thanks so much for coming on again. It's been a great pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Scott.
And coming up next, there's a new beta program released on Ancestry DNA. Krista Cowan's going to tell us why this is so exciting and important. You're going to love it. Coming up in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes. All right, back on the job, talking to my good friend Krista Cowan over at our sponsor, Ancestry.com. And Krista, we have a lot to talk about today because, where do we start with this? Back earlier this year, you guys with Ancestry DNA released a new feature where it kind of divided where our ethnicity came from, which ethnicity came from one parent, which came from the other. It was kind of up to us to decide which represented which parent. And now we've gone to a whole new level here because just recently I got a beta test on my DNA test results that showed that we could divide now our DNA matches by parent. And to me, that's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal, Scott. I'm so excited to be here to talk about this because this is a first of its kind scientific innovation with DNA. And I think it's going to help people make discoveries not only at a faster rate, but also discoveries they didn't even know were possible just a few weeks ago.
Absolutely. You know, I was thinking back on this. In order to know which side your DNA match came from in the past, you typically needed to test at least one parent, right?
Yeah. So if you had tested one parent, we could say, oh, those matches all match your mom. And we could go down to about 20 centimorgans. But then we just kind of assumed the matches that didn't match her matched your dad, but we weren't sure. Now this just changes the whole thing. So it's a technology called Side View, which is a proprietary technology that the scientists at Ancestry have developed. And the reason they've been able to do that is because there's more than 22 million people who have tested in the Ancestry DNA network.
Yeah.
And so we're able to take all of that genomic data, and without even having a parent tested, we can say, oh, this is one side of your family tree, one side of your pair of chromosomes, and this is the other side. Now, your DNA doesn't come labeled in your body, mom's side, dad's side,
right,
but we can split it into parent 1 and parent 2. And now when we apply it to the matches in your match list, all the way down to the bottom matches at 8 centimorgans, hopefully you know some of those matches at the top of your list and can make an educated determination about which parent is parent 1 and which parent is parent 2. And as soon as you label them, your whole match list gets labeled.
Yeah, and now you can split it too. Click a button and say, show me by parent, or you can show me all as we've had in the past. I mean, this is really kind of fun stuff. And it also suggests some family surnames that are kind of common under the father's side or the mother's side.
Yeah, so in addition to splitting your matches, we also now have added a tab to the Ancestry DNA match page called By Parent, and we'll show you common surnames. So if you're not sure, hopefully that will help you start to figure it out. We also have now incorporated that ethnicity inheritance that we launched back in the spring. So that's going to show up there, so you can start to see the breakdown of ethnicity by parent, the matches by parent. It's really grouping it all in one place where you can see that really clearly.
So if somebody was going to try to determine, okay, I'm trying to figure out an ancestral parent to my second or third great grandfather or grandmother, this would be a way to at least narrow down maybe more than half of your matches, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the average user at Ancestry, I think, is now up to about 60,000 matches per person.
Wow.
A lot of data to sort through. And especially if you're new to DNA or newer to family history, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So this does exactly that. It just cuts that list in half. So now you're working with half that amount of matches to start to narrow in on some of those family history mysteries that may have eluded you till now.
All right. This is a question that I know that people are thinking when they hear this. Do you see the day where it could be broken down now to grandparents?
Oh, wow. We give you an inch, Scott, and you just want it all.
I'm trying not to be selfish and greedy, but is that something that's scientifically, at least theoretically, possible?
Theoretically, it is absolutely possible, yes. And it's so exciting as a genealogist for me to look at that and try not to put pressure on the Ancestry DNA science team to move faster. But yeah, theoretically, it is possible. And one of the questions that we've been getting is, well, I've already tested my parents, so how is this of value to me? And it seems pretty obvious to some people, but to others, you have to stop and think, I've tested both of my parents, so I didn't need my match list split, but I only was able to test one of my grandparents. And so now I have my dad's full match list split, even though he only, had his mother tested. And my mom's parents weren't tested at all, so now I have her full match list split as well. And so, you start to think about that, and then you can compare that to cousins and siblings. It's not just about the power of your test and your match list. It's also the compounded power of the family members that you've tested that gives immediate benefit now, even without going to that next hopeful step.
Boy, think of those listeners who've actually tested their grandparents, and maybe the grandparents have passed, and now potentially you can split their parents, and you're going back to the great-grandparent lines. Yeah.
My grandmother tested before she passed, and I'm looking at her match list, and it's so exciting to me to be able to just look at that and have her matches split paternal side, maternal side, and now, I'm looking at great-grandparents level DNA.
Wow. Now, it is beta, and that means there are going to be some issues, and I really respect the fact that companies these days are rolling things out before they're perfect, because the reality is nothing's ever perfect. Get it out there, find out what's wrong with it, get the feedback, and I know that not everybody has this feature available on their Ancestry DNA results quite yet.
That's correct. So, the first thing is you'll see that beta tag, if you have it, on that By Parent tab. And we want feedback. So if there's something that just absolutely doesn't make sense, contact Ancestry. You can contact us through the chat on our health center. You can contact us on our Facebook page, and we'll walk you through it to see if there's just something that's been labeled incorrectly on your side, which is probably the number one error that we're seeing right now. People had labeled their ethnicities when we split out that ethnicity inheritance last spring, and turns out some people mislabeled them. They thought it was one thing, and now that the matches are coming in, they just need to switch those labels, and it's a pretty simple fix. You can figure it out yourself, or we'll help you with that. So we have not yet rolled it out to every Ancestry DNA customer. We will be rolling it out over the next several months, and we are asking users to send in feedback as they work with that DNA match list in the meantime.
Any stories that have come in as a result of this new technology? I mean, it's only been out a couple of weeks.
You know, I think you and I have talked about this before. Every Sunday night, my dad and I get together over the phone, and we work on our Ancestry DNA matches. His math brain really loves working with the centimorgans and trying to figure out the probabilities of the different relationships. And we pulled up this new feature as soon as it was available, and we had a match that we thought was on his mom's side this whole time, and we had found a common ancestor even, but it was labeled paternal. And we were a little confused by that at first until we thought, well, maybe that's a clue to something. And we dug into it, and it turns out this person is also related to my grandfather's side of the family. And my grandfather and grandmother, their families never lived anywhere near one another. So the fact that we found this second relationship, it would have never even occurred to us to look for it had that match not been labeled as a paternal match.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, and we should mention here, too, that there is a category for when a match shares both the father's side and the mother's side, and another category that says we can't figure it out quite yet.
Yeah, those unassigned matches, people are going to want to keep an eye on that. There's two reasons a match might be unassigned. One is it takes a lot of processing to run this entire database of matches. And so we actually did it last April, and the science team has been working on it this whole time to get it to a point where we could release it. And so any new matches that you've received since April are going to be listed as unassigned until we reprocess all of that data again, which we expect to do in the coming months.
Amazing stuff. Thanks so much, Krista. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
All right, and David Allen Lambert is coming up next as we answer your questions on Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Genies, our friends at BYU TV have a new series out created just for us, family historians. It's called How I Got Here. It's a fast-paced travel show where young adults accompany their immigrant parents back to where they came from, their countries of origin. These are 10-day trips of a lifetime where these parent-child duos relive the sacrifice, struggle, and circumstances that led their families to leave to where they are now. There's a new episode every week with visited countries including Italy, Serbia, Mexico, Chile, Israel, Slovakia, and Ghana. BYU TV is on Roku and Fire Stick, online at byutv.org, or through the BYU TV app. How I Got Here is available now with a new episode every week. Feel the impact this journey has on those who grew up not knowing. And just a warning, keep a box of Kleenex nearby. You're going to need it. Hey, Genies. As we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow Genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies.
Have you hit a brick wall in your family tree? Are you unsure how to use your DNA test results to resolve a research question? Do you want to travel where your ancestors walked? and need to find details before you go? Need help joining a lineage society? Whatever your genealogy research question, the answer is Legacy Tree Genealogist. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been helping clients all over the globe discover their story since 2004. Legacy Tree has carefully selected and trained professionals who specialize in hundreds of countries and languages, as well as probate research and DNA analysis. And when you need experts on the ground in the countries where your ancestors came from, Legacy Tree Genealogists calls upon its global network of on-site researchers who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. That's legacytree.com.
All right, back at it on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fisher here. David Allen Lambert is back over there in Boston from NEHGS, the New England Historic Genealogical Society, and AmericanAncestors.org. And David, our first question and Ask Us Anything today is from Lydia in Henderson, Nevada. And she says, "Hi, I'm new to genealogy. I recently overheard some researchers in an archive talk about finding ancestors in a mug book. They can't possibly be talking about pictures of their criminal ancestors, can they?" Lydia.
Well, it is entirely possible that you have ancestors in mug books. I sure know that I probably have a couple.
Yeah.
But it is a slang dialect term the genealogists and sometimes historians use, referring to county histories that usually have photos or biographical sketches of the leading people of the community. Hence, their mug would be in the book.
Yep.
They were really a vanity press fish. I mean, people that were factory owners or bank presidents or doctors, whatnot. Someone would come around to the county and say, "We're writing a history, and do you want to buy a copy of the book?" "Oh, yes." "Well, if you're going to buy X amount of copies, we'll put your story in there." And so the late 19th, early 20th centuries, these pretty much dotted in every county in America.
Totally.
There's usually one or two, but they're good because they often have a town history in them as well,
Sure.
where there may not be a published town history. So I always have that as a go-to, especially when I'm looking for someplace in the Midwest that we don't have a book for, perhaps. The other thing is it might supply a photo, and it may have a genealogical background. Not that they are always the most thorough and detail-oriented, but it might say that John Lambert arrived in this town in 1887 and has ran the bank ever since. He descends from Lamberts who came over from England in 1640 that settled in Rowley, Massachusetts, and his grandfather came across the Appalachian. So I mean, you're going to get all sorts of stories, but again, they're clues, but a lot closer to the origin of the truth of the story than you might have in your generation. So
Absolutely.
I find them valuable. Have you found ancestors in them with pictures?
Totally, and great stories and some things that actually linked some of our sides, mostly on my wife's side because she was from the Midwest, and these seemed to be really prolific there as opposed to the major cities. The major cities were just too big, but in the smaller towns, boy, if you weren't in that, you weren't anybody. And so it was sometimes fun to see these tales. I remember one of my wife's ancestors' brothers had actually taken this barge. He hauled the body of William Henry Harrison back to the burial place through a section of Pennsylvania. And I thought, there's a story we never would have found before, because they wouldn't put the name of the guy who did that in a newspaper story.
Yeah. Well, in genealogy, there are a lot of slang or acronyms, for instance. So, I mean, GEDCOM. Most people know what a GEDCOM is, or maybe you don't. It's a file from Family Search that was basically created so genealogy programs across the board would talk to each other so you could exchange data, and it stands for Genealogical Data Communication. It came back in like 1999. It was first used.
It's been around for a while now.
It has. How about VRs, vital records? Or I'm going to go search some BMDs.
Yep, birth, marriage, and death, and that's over in England.
Years ago, if you were using microfiche before Family Search was online, you may have looked at the IGI, the International Genealogical Index.
And there was the TIB also, the Temple Index Bureau, used by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, an AF, ancestral file. There's all sorts of acronyms, abbreviations, and slang terms. Us genealogists that have been doing it for a while have. So don't worry, Lydia, there won't be a test. Most of us are more than happy to share these little snippets of our knowledge all the time.
Absolutely. All right, great question, good answer. Thank you so much, David. And we got another question coming up next when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, our final go-round this week on Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Fisher here, David over there. And David, this question comes from Richard in Jacksonville, Florida. He says, Genie Geniuses. I've never been called that before. I like that. Genie Geniuses. I am a descendant of President James Garfield, whose absurd doctors did him more damage than his would-be assassin. That's very true. I have heard of an organization of presidential descendants. Do you know where I might join it? That is a great question. And David, there is an organization that's actually been featured, I think, on CBS Sunday Morning, or was it on 60 Minutes? Do you remember seeing that? It wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't actually very long ago at all. In fact, that organization, I have a friend who's a member of it. His name is Tweed Roosevelt. He's a great-grandson of Teddy Roosevelt.
Ah, okay, I found the website for it. It's called the Society of Presidential Descendants.org. And yes, there's Tweed Roosevelt, and he looks like his great-grandfather quite a bit.
He does indeed.
Yeah, put a mustache on him and have him say bully, and I think we've got him back. And in fact, we've got a McKinley descendant as the vice president. LBJ's daughter, I guess, is the vice president. And then we've got a grandchild of Harry Truman who looks like his grandfather. It's kind of fun to look at this. They have ways for you to join as a direct descendant. There's also a place for collateral descendants, friends and financial supporters. And there's a student rate as well.
Well, I think I have some cousins who are American presidents, like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and people like that. But, I mean, not so close that I could say they're in my family tree as far as immediate family. Gerald Ford comes closest for me. How about you?
I've got like 10 of them that I'm related to. I think my wife's maybe around 12. But none who are particularly close. They're all pretty distant, 7th, 8th, 10th cousins. But this society says it's providing an opportunity for descendants of U.S. presidents to share a camaraderie amongst each other and to promote educational opportunities and award book prizes periodically, recognizing books published about the presidency. And I remember watching this show about this group, and it's really kind of fun because they have their name badges and they have references to who they descend from, and they kind of gather together. And it has no recognition of party one way or the other. Nobody much cares about that because they have this unique tie one to another because of the fact that they have this person in their background. And, think about it, Dave, when we talk about 245 years or so since the beginning of the country, we're only talking about, 6 generations, 7?
That's very true. I mean, there can't be many grandchildren of 19th century presidents, but one that I can think of, Harrison Ruffin Tyler, who's 91. His grandfather, born in 1790, was our 10th U.S. president, John Tyler. Yeah,
isn't that crazy? And he had a brother who only recently passed away. That's a long story within itself, but this is an interesting group, and I would certainly suggest, Richard, that if you have an interest in joining it, you go to societyofpresidentialdescendants.org and see how you might fit in with these folks. I'm just wondering how much Richard actually looks like James Garfield, David.
Yeah, amazing how those family traits can pass down.
So thanks for the question, Richard, and David, as always, thanks for joining us. Have a good week. And we'll talk to you next week. All right. And that's our show for this week. Thanks so much to our guest, Kristine Bartley, for coming on and talking about her exploits in gathering stories in a Des Moines cemetery. The whole thing has gone crazy. And to Krista Cowan from over at Ancestry.com, talking about their new beta test separating paternal and maternal DNA matches at Ancestry DNA. It's great stuff. You're going to want to hear what she has to say. If you missed any of it, of course, catch the podcast on Apple Media, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and ExtremeGenes.com. Talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.